Welcome to the Anchor Group podcast. This is episode number 5, and we're going to talk about BigCommerce Headless. And what that is going to do is going to be able to decouple your back end from your front end. Now, on this conversation, we have Max from our team. He's a BigCommerce developer, and he'll be going through some technical components, but make sure you stay tuned throughout the whole episode. We'll also address some of the less technical elements, specifically towards those marketers or other types of business decision makers. So let's go ahead and get into this episode.
Max, have you ever been on a podcast before?
Back in college, we had like a little philosophy podcast that we tried. I think we released like 2 episodes and then gave up on it. So I guess if you count that, I think I've racked up like 7 total views, and 6 of them were probably me just like figuring out if my microphone sounded okay. But yeah,
you got to start somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for hopping on this podcast today. And like I said, we're going to talk about headless commerce, specifically how it relates to kind of the world of BigCommerce. We'll get into some kind of the more nitty-gritty details around that. But headless commerce has a lot to do with the front end of an e-commerce website. So that's kind of where I want to start today's conversation, gentlemen. So quick question for you all. Are there any websites, or let me phrase that differently. What is one of your favorite websites from a theme perspective, from the way it looks when you log on to that website? Any thoughts or any personal favorites from either of you?
Yeah, I think probably the one that comes to mind is Black Diamond Equipment. If you're an outdoorsy person, ski or climb mountains or any of those fun things. They sell a lot of ski equipment, and then mountaineering equipment is kind of their like specialization. I think they just do some cool things with images and some of the transition stuff that, I don't know. I also ski and I buy their gear, so that's probably part of the allegiance there, but I just think they have a really nice looking site.
Hey, I will call out Black Diamond headlights. Those things are no joke. They're legit.
Yeah,
I use them for camping and that sort of thing. If you're into headlights, go check them out. They're a good product. Caleb, how about you?
I always like complicated websites that do neat things, especially in the B2B space. Anything that can configure a product, do some type of a product configuration. Those are my favorite because I know that there's a lot of work to go into them. And like I always appreciate when people put in some good effort into their product detail pages and the overall functionality, specifically on the B2B side. I find those ones pretty fun overall.
Yeah, right on. For me, there's a website called rockauto.com. And here's the deal. Every 6 months, I get on a kick where I think I want to work on my cars by myself in my garage. About 4 hours into the project, I realized it was like a terrible decision. And I buy parts. Rock Auto is known in like the auto parts space. But the deal about this website, it is like a big Excel spreadsheet. And it's like you just click, the little plus mark on the left-hand side, and it has a drop down of all the parts you can get. It's just a very unique website. You don't see many of them out there today. But I thought that was... it's interesting how unique the website is in the world of e-commerce today.
Yeah, you mean even more than just the design. Some may think that design just has to be pretty, but sometimes it just has to be functional for that industry. And that's what makes it a good website, is because it's the most functional and easy to use for the application that you're shopping for. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind, that not every website can be designed like an apparel website for it to be useful and easy to use.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for sharing some of that. Let's get into the conversation about headless commerce. So just to preface this conversation, headless commerce, some people might think of that as a buzzword in the world of e-commerce today, and headless commerce has been around for a while. And essentially what it is it's a different way of setting up a website. Think of it's just a different architecture. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And there are pros, there are cons to going the headless route, and there has been good reasons. There's been, I guess, movement in the conversation around headless commerce in recent years, especially recently with BigCommerce specifically. So that's what we'll dive in today. But I guess let's see here, Max. Anything to add to, I guess, that overall definition of headless commerce from your perspective?
Yeah. Headless commerce, I just like, when I think of headless commerce, I think of cool. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, but I think first you have to kind of understand the evolution of e-commerce and how we got to where we are with headless commerce. And the biggest thing is, Like if you look at how e-commerce websites were built before Shopify, before BigCommerce kind of coming in and changing how we kind of have this e-commerce platform as a service is now what you think of when you think e-commerce. Before that, we just had people building websites, and you had to build your own product management system. You had to build your own front end to go with whatever API and database you're using, and kind of build your own platform. And that was before Shopify. Then Shopify comes along and they revolutionize e-commerce. They build the e-commerce as a platform. And with that, there's a lot of improvements for e-commerce store holders, right? You can set up an e-commerce store in 10 minutes now. You go on, you buy a subscription, and you're ready to go. You're ready to sell products. But you're also kind of confined to the patterns that Shopify or whatever e-commerce platform you're going with has developed. And that's where headless commerce kind of was introduced. Is it's essentially these platforms or these e-commerce platforms give you their API, so that you can extend on top of it and you can build your own e-commerce store in the way that you want to build it with some of those tools that they've given you out of the box. And that's kind of where we're at today with headless commerce. Is if you look at a platform like BigCommerce, you have this open-ended API, and you can use the platform kind of as you see fit, as it solves your business need. But you can bring your own additional APIs to this architecture and kind of extend on top of it. So when I think of headless e-commerce, I think of extremely customizable. I think of fast, because you're using a kind of cutting edge front end with that. And then I think about flexibility, right? If the e-commerce platform gets me 90% of the way to where I need to be, I can now get it all the way there. I can build that last 10% on top of my platform as a service layer. And I have the e-commerce site that I want, and that fits my business need.
Let me ask a couple more questions there because I'm not quite understanding it entirely. Let me just prod a little bit more. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about headless commerce, I want to get like a really good understanding of it. So there's two pieces when I think of a website. There's the back office side of the platform. So with BigCommerce, that would be your product catalog, where you're setting the pricing, where you see sales orders. This is before they get into your full order management system of like NetSuite or something like that. And then you've got your front end piece, which is your page builder. You're drag and dropping this about us section and this FAQ section and all of those components. I think the way you just described it is that it's decoupling the back end of BigCommerce from that drag and drop page builder tool. But can you verify or correct that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So if you look at, I'm just going to go with Shopify because that's like the most common and they're kind of known for their page builder tool. You have this pretty extensible page builder tool, but you're confined to the monolithic architecture that Shopify lays forth for you. So what I say when I say monolith is I have my back end and I have my front end, and they are connected to one another. And there's really nothing I can do about that fact, right? I have my page builder exists within my Shopify backend. I go in, I make some customizations. Maybe if I'm lucky, I can pull it down and do a few more advanced customizations. But at the end of the day, I'm re-uploading it to that Shopify environment. And I'm kind of confined to that. So when we go headless, the first thing you typically see with headless is you take that front end and you put it somewhere else. So for a lot of the time, that's something like a platform like Vercel, where we can host either a Next.js app, or a Svelte app or a Vue app, and we completely remove that front end from that back end. And that might seem like extra work or inconvenience, but you get a lot of advantages with that. You have all the source code to your front end, which means you can extend it in any way you want. You also get the speed that comes with a modern web framework that some of those WYSIWYG page builder tools aren't designed for. So that's exactly it. When we talk about headless, we're decoupling the front end of our website from that platform as a service, the BigCommerce, the Shopify, whatever it may be that you're using on the back end, and we're standing it up by itself, and we're using the API for that platform to handle those interactions.
So when you're saying you're using the API, whenever you're interacting with the website to register, you're from your headless, whatever your front end solution is that you plug in. I think you said Vercel.
Yeah, our Vercel's the hosting platform, but
Okay.
like we would use Next.js for
Next.js.
BigCommerce
Okay.
typically.
So when upon registration there, you're directly making an API call to BigCommerce to register in the application in BigCommerce.
Yep. So your front end will still talk to your platform, but we're just using the API that BigCommerce provides to handle that registration call. Same thing with when we do something like add a product to a cart. We're making a call back to BigCommerce to handle that interaction for our customer.
Is that the same thing that native page builders are doing anyways? They're just using those same APIs to talk back and forth?
Yep, so they're using the same APIs for the most part. From an architectural perspective, it gets a little muddy depending on which specific platform you're talking about. And I haven't worked at Shopify, so I don't know exactly how they're handling that request on the back end. But it's doing something, essentially the same. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense understanding them. You mentioned Vercel, what was that? Started with an S.
Oh, it's Svelte. Yep.
Svelte, and then Next.js. Can you describe the difference between those? And then we can kind of understand where they fit.
Yeah. So Vercel is the hosting platform that allows you to host these headless front ends. And we're not confined to just Vercel or just a front end like Next or like Svelte or Vue. Those are the three big players in today's kind of like front end marketplace. I would say the biggest two being Next.js and Vue, and then Svelte is kind of this like it's the new kid on the block, right? But Vercel is where we host that front end. And we use Vercel because that's what BigCommerce has kind of positioned as the hosting platform for headless front ends on their platform. Primarily, that's what we work in here. But we can go and host something wherever we want. We could go and build a completely application in a framework like Laravel. That's just another kind of up and coming framework that uses PHP on the back end for their APIs. And we could host that on our own server. If we had a server in the closet here, we could spin that up, set it up here, and we can still talk to BigCommerce or whatever that e-commerce backend is. So when I talk about Vercel, that's just a hosting platform. With Headless Commerce, we can use any hosting platform. We're not tied to Vercel. And then when I talk about things like Next.js or Svelte, that's the front end. And that's where we actually build or write our website code. So that's where we write like our HTML markup that's displaying our pages, our home pages. That's where we add all of our like CSS styles that make our site look beautiful. Any animations or scrolling, all that's handled on that front end framework side of things. And that again is completely agnostic to, or BigCommerce is completely agnostic to what front end framework it uses. So we can switch those out on the fly and have no problems really working with BigCommerce.
And just to hop in here, I think, Max, to your point earlier, you talked about flexibility, performance, and speed. And one thing I'd add there is scalability. And what you've just described about being able, even just right now, you mentioned that you can really, swap things out as needed. And to me, that's really where you can hit on being flexible, being fast, and being scalable, because you do have more autonomy in what you're choosing. Because based, as businesses change and their needs change and their customers change and go-to-market strategy changes, at times we might need pieces of the puzzle that we can swap out for others that are more dependable or needed at that time as things evolve within a business.
Yeah, exactly right. And it also allows you to do a lot of cool things on the content management marketing side of things, right? So, for example, you can integrate with that front end whatever content management system you want, really. If you want to use Contentful, if that's what your marketing team uses, maybe that's already what you use for your blog. We can integrate that then with your e-commerce site. Where with something like a monolithic architecture, it gets very challenging to integrate that like third-party content management system. So it also allows you to add other pieces into the puzzle that maybe someone who's spinning up a first go at an e-commerce business on a smaller e-commerce platform plan, they're not going to need that. But as you start to like grow into that mid-market enterprise company, Headless allows you to do a lot of things that a monolith wouldn't necessarily allow.
Okay, so you just kind of started to get to a point that I was curious about, which is what about for marketing? I know that you're a BigCommerce developer and work on integration development, and so obviously your default talk track will be on the technical side. And but ultimately, after people hire you / Anchor Group, after they hire you to do the BigCommerce implementation, I'm wondering, like, that it sounds like you're alluding to it being easy for the marketing team to manage the day-to-day content.
Yeah, so you can set that up. The thing that's great about Headless is you can set that up how your marketing team wants it. BigCommerce is rolling out or has begun to roll out a newer product called MakeSwift, which is a page building tool that uses React components with Next.js that allows marketers to come to a developer and say, hey, I really want this component for my blogs. And we can go in, we can design a custom React component that you can just drag and drop wherever you need it to go in your content pages, right? So whether that's a blog, whether that's an About Us, you can just reuse this component all over your site. And we can make those components modifiable. We can add parameters to them so that you can add content sections, all the things that you would have in a tool like that, and allows us to really extend the platform that already exists.
Okay.
And yeah.
So you talked about the front end that you can extend the platform for them. And because it's decoupling the back end and from the front end page builder, all the same marketing integrations with BigCommerce aren't impacted, right?
Some of the marketing integrations are, it depends. So typically we would replace the native BigCommerce sort of like content management system or blog builder with that. So either whether it's MakeSwift, whether it's a traditional content management system, we typically position Strappy, which is a pretty commonly used one across the industry. We also have, we've had clients come through that are using more intense, and we've vetted more intense content management systems like Contentful. That's one that BigCommerce sees a lot on their side. They're currently building out, I believe, like pre-built integrations with their Headless starter kit for CMSs like that. That's more of like a enterprise tier content management system. So it just kind of depends on the business's use case. BigCommerce does allow you to use that native blog builder if you want to, and you can use that completely untouched, and it will work with Catalyst, or you can replace it with something that gives you a little more flexibility and a little more power on the marketing side. That's kind of how I would describe it.
Okay, well, the blog is part of the content on the front end, so it makes sense. But what about things like a Klaviyo integration for email marketing, like those type of things? Are those impacted?
For sure. No, those aren't impacted at all. So that kind of goes back to that headless architecture and how we're able to just string together kind of a mix and match of APIs that suit your business. So essentially what's happening when you're adding something like Klaviyo is its kind of own standalone microservice that is interacting with the BigCommerce platform to handle the email marketing. Maybe you're running promotions on a promotions app. Same thing, kind of like how the promotions don't necessarily affect Klaviyo. They can, right? You can create an integration between your promotion service and Klaviyo if you want to run an email marketing campaign. We can also treat those as their own individual microservices that all kind of talk to each other and allow us to create these complex integrations.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand the picture. One more question because I don't know what it is. Catalyst, you brought it up just briefly there. What's Catalyst?
Yeah, so Catalyst is BigCommerce's starter kit for headless e-commerce. It's a out-of-the-box, very minimal theme that allows you to start with a Next.js app, that's that front end that we talked about earlier, that's ready to go. You could clone Catalyst to your own repo, and you could push that up to Vercel, that's that hosting platform, and you're going to have a e-commerce store that is ready to sell products. You connect that to your BigCommerce store. It populates your products, it populates your category pages, it populates your product display pages, and you're ready to go. You're ready to sell e-commerce on a headless storefront. And why BigCommerce has developed that is to lower that cost of entry to headless commerce.
Okay. Now, kind of on that note, there's I just thought of a couple things. Is let's say someone already has BigCommerce using the Stencil, the page builder, that normal page builder when they're on a BigCommerce environment, and they're like already interested in wanting to have Anchor Group implement them from their current version to a headless version, and kind of take what they have now and move it to headless so that it can open up a lot of options. What's that process look like? Do you have to start totally from scratch with a whole new BigCommerce environment? What does that look like?
Yeah, no. So you can reuse pretty much that's like kind of the great thing about BigCommerce and how they've designed their platform for headless e-commerce is you don't have to do anything on your back end, really. All you need to do is like kick off a project where we're developing a front end kind of in the shadows, right? Your Stencil store will remain live until the headless store is ready to go. We're building your headless storefront kind of behind the scenes, and then when go live for that headless project comes, we're just gonna swap the storefronts out. So we're gonna remove the Stencil storefront from the internet, and we're gonna replace it with our headless build, and then we're pretty much it's almost like nothing changed, right? Except for you're gonna have this sweet new looking site. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be blazingly fast, and you're gonna have a headless e-commerce site from that time on.
That sounds really interesting to have that. I mean, I know SEO matters with a lot of these companies, and page speed goes a really long ways. It makes a noticeable difference, especially on mobile. Now, what is the amount of effort from clients? I actually don't know this answer. Some of these questions I actually don't know because I'm just in our NetSuite and Suite Commerce practice. But what's the effort from the client in order to go from an existing BigCommerce store on Stencil? Not like what's the total cost of the project, because I know that has to be quoted based on their needs. But normally, what does the client have to do? How much of their time is being absorbed because they already have the back office set up of BigCommerce? Like the main storefront, it's just the front end. So what are they involved in? Is it a lot of work that they have to do, or is it kind of minimal because it's just development?
Yeah, it kind of depends. It depends on the goals of the project. I would say the place they're probably going to be the most involved is with kind of that store design. What do you want the store to look like? We do offer graphic design services, right? So we'll have one of our designers come in. We'll do some workshops. We'll talk through, what do you want your homepage? What do you want your call to actions to be? What do you want when we go to category pages? How do you want those to look? Well, your existing category structure, are we keeping it the same when we migrate? Or are we going to do a rework of some of those things? So those are kind of the questions that we're asking when we're vetting one of these projects, and kind of how you respond to those and your goals for that migration. That will determine how much work it is for you, right? If you want the site to look relatively similar to how it looked before, and you don't have a ton of input on how you want the new site to look, it's not going to change drastically, and your goal is speed. It's like, yeah, we can come in. It can be relatively minimal effort on the client's end, and we can build them a site that's faster in the background. If it's something where you have a goal in mind, and with that migration, that's where it becomes more involved for the client, because obviously your e-commerce business is your e-commerce business, and you probably have the vision for what you want that to look like. So clients are obviously very actively engaged in that case, and giving input onto design and the theme of their site and how they want the page structures to be. And that's where personally, that's when clients are really fun to work with, because we get to use a lot of creativity to kind of bring their vision to life, if that makes sense.
And I think this leads to the idea of when is the right time for a company to really start considering headless commerce. And Max, what you alluded to earlier from your experience within working with headless commerce is that it's probably not the best option for companies who are just getting a start in e-commerce, right? Just testing the water. On previous episodes, I've mentioned, say, for example, we got a mom and a pop shop corner store selling hardware that wants to, test the waters in e-commerce. Going headless right out of the gate is probably not the best option for them, if we're being honest, right? But what I've seen is that companies that have an established e-commerce presence and really want to take it to the next level and have the team that's eager and excited to help manage a website at the next level, right? To manage these different components. Those are the sorts of companies that are good candidates to really start considering headless commerce. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
Yeah, I think it depends on your existing business, kind of as you alluded to. I think if, for say, you're a client that has a very well established B2B business, doesn't necessarily have a existing e-commerce store or like a massive presence on the e-commerce side of things, I don't think that they necessarily have to be turned away from the idea, especially if there's someone who's going in onto an e-commerce platform in that like enterprise tier. I think especially with like Headless, BigCommerce, Catalyst, that tier for entry has been, or the cost of entry, and just like the investment for entry from like a manpower perspective has definitely dropped substantially from kind of this Catalyst release. But I do think you're right. Like if you're on a lower tier from like a pricing perspective on an e-commerce site, probably you're still in that like page builder stage of your company. Then that BigCommerce Stencil or traditional BigCommerce or e-commerce monolith is best for you. Then as we get into those like more mid-market enterprise questions that are maybe established on Stencil or another page builder platform, we start to ask some questions. One, are you getting beat out on SEO by a competitor? That's the one thing that like almost certainly you can find immediate benefit from when you go headless, is if SEO is a big concern of your business and you need SEO to stay alive, then headless is for sure something to at least discuss, if not think about pretty seriously. The second is if you need some like pretty intense customization that's just going to end up being more work on a page builder tool than it's going to be in a headless environment. And that's that we see more as we get into that like enterprise tier, when you maybe have like a B2B feature of your business that causes like the checkout flow or the even like product configuration flow to start to get more advanced. And we see like customization that can benefit from headless there. And then, yeah, anywhere else where you just need that like flexibility, headless definitely can become useful. And then the third is if you're like a massive enterprise tier company, you're kind of doing a lot of your own tech stuff already. You have your own servers, maybe you're doing like, you have other business needs like behind the scene where we can just get some nicer integration when we start to get into that custom land. And that's when you're talking about like very, very large enterprise e-commerce companies.
Yeah, that's all very well put, Max. Now, one thing we've talked a lot about the positives, right, and the benefits of going with headless, right? We talked about things like flexibility, having the ability to customize website as needed, performance, speed, the scalability factor, changing out parts as needed as a business evolves. But we'd be remiss if we didn't spend a little bit of time talking about some of the pitfalls of headless commerce, or some things that people need to be aware of as they consider changing to headless commerce. And Max, from your experience, I'm just wondering if you can touch on a couple of those right now.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just like first, like properly vetting if headless commerce is right for you is gonna just save you upfront. Like asking and kind of like going through that what I was just doing, where I'm thinking about like what are the use cases for headless commerce and how does this fit with my business? Then really the biggest thing after that that I can think of that could be a concern is maintenance. If your site is something where you're going to be doing a lot of changes super frequently, and those changes fit with an existing page builder tool, and it depends for that use case, right? Because then if those changes that you're making are limited by the page builder tool, then you're going to want something headless that gives you that more flexibility. So it's kind of like it's this balance of figuring out really where you fit, and that's where like a service like what we provide can be helpful as well, and kind of that guidance.
Yeah. Going to headless commerce, and when an e-commerce website is a mainstream of revenue for a company, you got to do your due diligence on it. And working with a company like us here at Anchor Group, where we have experience working in both of the world of Stencil or those monolithic platforms, along with working in headless, we can help guide you through that process. And that's what I know the three of us, that's what we enjoy doing every day, is helping steer folks in the right direction to make the best, the most informed and best decisions for their business. Now, as we start to wrap things up here, just curious, moving forward, as we think 6 months from now or a year from now, any predictions on where you see headless commerce going, specifically with BigCommerce?
Yeah, I think specifically in BigCommerce, headless is going to become a big deal. I think it's already showing that. And I think if you like look at e-commerce as a whole and like the traditional e-commerce platform as a service, and you were to put it on a bell curve, that sort of like monolithic architecture on a bell curve of like adoption versus will it fall off? I would say we're somewhere like right in the middle of that, like right at the kind of at the peak, maybe even a little bit before the peak, or a little bit after the peak. We're somewhere in there of like monolithic architecture is very, very is how e-commerce is currently. And I think with BigCommerce and headless, we're at the very front of that bell curve. So we've seen the adoption in the past couple of years. We've seen the adoption from the enterprise tiers. I think what BigCommerce is doing is they're providing a platform that's ready to go, ready to sell with headless e-commerce, which is just going to lower the cost of entry and is going to kind of propel us to kind of this greater adoption of headless e-commerce. And kind of the work that they're doing, specifically with their platform, I think is going to make it a lot easier for everyone to kind of get on that headless e-commerce wave.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Max. And one thing that we've stated a couple of times is that when you go with headless commerce, right, you're still keeping the back end of your BigCommerce account. Now, headless commerce, right, it's been around for years, but what BigCommerce is doing is it's giving you a really good experience within the back end, right? But now you can also they're lowering the barrier of entry when it comes to having that headless e-commerce storefront, which you said through Catalyst, through partnerships with Vercel, through making things like Makeswift more prominent within their ecosystem, stuff like that. So they're really stacking the deck when it comes to headless commerce in a really good way, specifically for those mid-market merchants, if they want to go that route.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode. Episode 5 of the Anchor Group podcast, where we covered quite a few technical details of headless commerce. If there's anything that didn't make sense to you, that's all right. This can be a tricky subject. Feel free to reach out to us. You can simply go to anchorgroup.tech, or you can, hop on our YouTube channel, leave a comment on this video if you're watching it on YouTube, or somewhere else. We're happy to get in contact with you and help just kind of guide you through the steps. We've worked with other people in the past, helping guide them through the decision-making process, and we will be happy to work with you as well. Max, thank you for hopping on the call today. Great to have you.
Yeah,
Caleb?
for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Max. I learned a lot today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, guys.
Thanks.